Hi. She brought handouts this time, glossy, color-coded, and bound with those little plastic spines she orders in bulk. Emotional Accountability Training, Session 3. She said it like we were part of some shared executive retreat, not sitting at opposite ends of a couch we picked out during better days. I used to think the suede would soften arguments. Turns out, even good furniture can't make a bad agenda sound noble. She started with a breathing exercise, always the breathing. Her voice was syrup slow, like she was narrating some meditation app. Close your eyes. Feel the discomfort. Let it teach you. I didn't close mine. I watched her instead. Watched the way she positioned herself, spine tall, legs crossed just so, a small smile like she was halfway through forgiving me for sins I hadn't committed. Not yet, anyway. You tend to intellectualize emotion, she said, flipping to a diagram of the prefrontal cortex. That's a common trauma response. No shame in it. Her eyes flicked up, measuring me. I didn't respond. I nodded once, the same nod I used in boardrooms when someone pitched a doomed product with enough conviction to make you want to believe. She talked for an hour. Phrases like safe container and emotional bypassing spilled out between infographics and clinical anecdotes. I nodded again. Took a sip of my coffee. Let her feel heard. That was her phrase too. Feeling heard. She used it the way a hunter might say. Cornered. Somewhere around slide 11, she quoted Pema Chodron and compared my habit of asking clarifying questions to emotional deflection. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, it wasn't, but because I remembered the version of her who once loved that about me, who used to say my curiosity made her feel seen. Now it was a weapon in her therapeutic arsenal. Evidence of my emotional rigidity. I could still see that woman sometimes, flickers of her. In the way she sipped from her favorite tea mug, the one I bought her in Marfa. Or how she always tucked her right foot under her left thigh when she got comfortable. But mostly she was someone else now, someone curated. It wasn't until she left the room, bathroom break, another essential in her manual, that I noticed the binder she left behind. I wasn't snooping. I was just tired of feeling like a case study. I wanted to see the next chapter in my own diagnosis. It fell open too easily. Tucked inside, half crushed between printed worksheets and some notes about a future retreat she planned to host, was a folded receipt. Ritz-Carlton 2 nights. Lakeview Suite. Spa package. Champagne welcome. The date made my stomach tighten. That was the same weekend she'd gone off-grid. A solo retreat, she'd called it. For recalibration. I'd even texted her goodnight. She replied with a photo of a fire pit and her feet in wool socks. I'd stared at that photo for longer than I should have, wondering if she'd felt lonely without me. Now I realized she hadn't been alone. The receipt was crisp, barely folded. She hadn't even tried to hide it, just filed it like any other line item in her doctrine of healing. I slid it back into place, neat, undisturbed. When she came back, she picked up the binder without a glance, kept talking about emotional patterns and archetypes. Her face was open, serene, like a woman who believed in her own righteousness. That night, she made us pasta and opened a bottle of wine. She asked me about my meeting with the investor group like nothing had shifted. She still knew my calendar by heart. Still wore that delicate gold bracelet I gave her on our second anniversary. We talked about remodeling the upstairs office. Maybe more natural light, she said. I agreed, smiled, played along. Later, she kissed me goodnight. Her breath warm, her hand brushing my jaw like muscle memory. I closed my eyes and felt nothing but cold calculation. Hers and mine. She thought she was leading a healing. But something else had started that afternoon. Something quieter, sharper. The part of me she didn't think existed anymore. The one that builds systems, not stories, had just come online. And unlike her diagrams, my process wouldn't be open for discussion. I didn't say a word. Not that night, not the next morning, not even when she left her phone unlocked on the counter while boiling oats with chia seeds and dictating affirmations into her podcast app. I stirred my coffee, timed my expressions, and became the background character she thought I already was. She'd always said, "The most powerful person in a room is the one least reactive." I remembered that. Not because I believed it, but because she did. I started with the easy layer. Her coaching platform ran on the back end I'd built during our first pandemic lockdown. We'd stayed up late, ordered takeout, named database tables after Greek goddesses. Back then, she thought my attention to structure was romantic. Now, it was invisible, but not to me. She never learned how metadata logs interacted with her draft scheduler. She didn't know that deleting calendar events didn't wipe the server cache, or that every guest profile she input for brand collaborations stored a session token. I had built it too well, so I started reading. Deleted calendar blocks, vaguely titled Somatic Integration Workshop, turned out to be nested with travel metadata, airline bookings, hotel confirmations, not just one trip, 3, each one with overlapping timestamps to social media posts about being in stillness, or surrendering to nature. Her voice echoed in my head. Don't mistake stillness for absence, she'd whispered once, curled against me in bed. The irony clanged now. Absence was exactly what she'd perfected. I set up a private folder on a secure drive, dated everything, took screenshots, labeled each folder with nothing more than a simple numerical sequence. It felt clinical, detached, the way she always described me. Maybe she was right. She still kissed me goodnight, still left affirmations taped to the bathroom mirror, written in her looping, therapist handwriting. Things like, trust begins inside, and your resistance is your teacher. I started cataloging those too, not because I needed more evidence, but because I was starting to see the script. She'd already launched the exit, quietly, softly, like a strategic pivot in a business model. Still hugging investors while secretly filing paperwork for a new cap table. She was sunsetting me with grace. But I wasn't going quietly. What she didn't know, I had already built the thing she was preparing to steal. She hosted a new episode that week. Radical transparency in relationships. The irony burned hot enough to cauterize. I watched her edit it in the dining room, headphones on, fingers flying. Occasionally, she'd laugh at something, one of her own lines. Her face would soften into that curated glow she used in Instagram Reels, the one that made strangers call her a light worker. She was talking to him, of course. The calendar entries gave me his name. A simple tag. BC Strategy Sync. But I knew who he was before the initials clicked. Brian Carter. Executive coach. Former marriage casualty. Also, my college roommate. He used to sleep on our couch after his first wife left him. Drank half my whiskey. Cried about moral accountability. My wife, then girlfriend, used to say he had a wounded genius vibe. I thought he was just good at self-pity. Now he was helping her. Scale emotional influence. I didn't break. I documented. I cataloged every instance, every timestamped shift in tone, her new brand alignment, her email signature that now included co-founder, Verge Collective, a name I recognized, because I'd coined it in a brainstorming session 3 years ago. We were supposed to build it together. Back then it was us. Now, it was her and him. I watched the launch from across the dinner table. She'd light candles like nothing had changed, serve lentils in ceramic bowls, ask how my work was going with genuine interest, and I'd answer. I kept smiling, kept the game quiet, but every smile added to the archive. I wasn't reacting. I was recording. And when she finally tried to leave, I'd already be 3 moves ahead. I used to think betrayal would arrive like a siren, loud, unmistakable, red lights in the dark. But it didn't. It slid in like fog, blurring out lines I used to trust. One morning, I woke up and realized I couldn't tell the difference between her emotional insights and corporate spin. Between intimacy and intellectual property theft. Brian Carter. His name had appeared innocently enough. A booking link here, a coaching note there. But once I knew what to look for, the trail was obvious and nauseating. He wasn't just a one-off. He was threaded through everything. She'd brought him on as a consultant for her podcast brand. That much she told me over dinner one night. Just someone to help refine the leadership voice. But he was more than that. He was in the brand deck, the marketing copy, the repositioning strategy, for what used to be our shared project. His name was in the metadata of her keynote slides, hidden under file authorship tags. Amateur mistake, she called him. A brilliant mirror. I called him a parasite with a masterclass certificate. What made it worse, what sent something sharp and cold through my chest, was that he knew me, personally. We weren't close anymore, but we had history. Real history. He'd lived in our guest room after his divorce, cried into the same throw pillows she later embroidered with. Grow through what you go through. Back then, he used to call her my rock, told me I'd found someone rare. He wept on our porch swing the night his ex took the house. I lent him a suit for a job interview. He once left a note thanking us for reminding me what love looks like. Now, apparently, he was showing her what it looked like without me. I found their messages through an archived Slack channel, one she hadn't purged completely when migrating to a new workspace. He'd invited her under a pseudonym, Lucidops. The pretense was a content strategy audit. The content, though, was mostly him and her, talking late, strategizing, flirting. There was a thread titled, The Real Curriculum. She joked about how I turn every feeling into a TED Talk. Called me the ghost at the mic. He replied with a laughing emoji and added, but great diction. I scrolled in silence. They dissected me like a case study. My tone, my word choices, my unwillingness to let the feminine lead. They joked about liberating the narrative and decolonizing the brand voice, which, in context, meant erasing me from it. The podcast I built with her, the one whose tagline I wrote, had been rebranded. My name nowhere. They hadn't just crossed a line. They'd rewritten the map and left me off it. That night, she asked if I could help her export analytics from the original podcast database. Just a one-time pull, she said, before we migrate everything. I said yes. I pulled the data, cleaned it, packaged it neatly, but I added one line at the bottom of the CSV, just for me. A timestamp, a note. I built this, and I'm watching. I didn't know if she'd see it. Didn't care. I needed to say it, somewhere. I started seeing her differently after that. Not as a villain, she was too calculated for that. More like a strategist who believed her own pitch deck. She wasn't being cruel. She was optimizing. She still left early every Thursday. Group meditation, she said, and came back with eucalyptus on her skin and a glow that wasn't spiritual. I didn't follow her. Didn't need to. I had her itinerary embedded in the back end of her own CRM. She'd changed her password. Thought she was clever. But I'd built the two-factor system. Every time she smiled across the dinner table, I saw the man behind it. Every time she posted about transcendent partnerships, I saw his hand in the copy. They were building something together, and pretending I wasn't real. But I was. I was the one who named it, funded it, scaffolded it with code and late nights and belief. They thought they were launching a new curriculum. They forgot who wrote the first draft. It started with a file sync notification. She was in the guest room, her creation cave, recording another podcast episode. I was in my office, reviewing API updates. A shared folder blinked open on my screen for a half-second before she disabled permissions. Too late. My system still cached the preview. One file stood out, verge_leadership_rebrand_final.pptx. I stared at it. Not because I didn't expect it, but because of the finality in the name. She'd used my word, Verge. I remembered the day it came to us. We were driving home from a weekend in the desert, that rare weekend where we didn't check our phones. She said, I want to help women who are right on the verge, of power, of leaving, of becoming. I said, then that's the name. Now she'd scrubbed my name from the origin story. The deck was slick, 42 slides, minimal design, heavy on buzzwords. Verge wasn't a podcast anymore. It was a platform, a movement, a scalable leadership ecosystem for emotionally intelligent women. The logo had changed. The brand voice had shifted. But the bones were mine. And then I saw his name, Brian Carter, co-founder, strategic vision and integration. I sat back, hands cold. The man who once cried on our couch was now listed on a corporate pitch deck tied to IP I'd developed. The same man who mocked my diction in private threads was now building equity on the back of my code, my concept, my voice. I dug deeper. Opened our old legal folder from when we considered incorporating the podcast officially. She'd kept copies of everything, the early LLC drafts, the equity structure we never filed. But now, there were new documents. Different headers, different law firm, NDA templates. A revised cap table. A pre-drafted buyout clause labeled for an emotionally incompatible stakeholder. That was me, apparently, reduced to a variable in her legal strategy. The clause was chillingly specific. In the event of perceived emotional misalignment with core brand values, said stakeholder may be offered a strategic exit under confidentiality protections. She wasn't just leaving me. She was preparing to erase me. The kind of betrayal that doesn't scream, it audits, it files, it plans. But what she didn't know was that I'd already moved, quietly, 6 months ago. During a roundtable with an investor friend, we'd discussed IP protection as a form of relationship hygiene. It had sounded cynical then. Now, it felt prophetic. I'd filed the patent for the core tech under my name alone, not out of mistrust, but because it had been my design. She'd seen it as support, a vote of confidence. But I'd known even then, code survives sentiment. So while she built emotional leverage, I sealed technical ownership. I printed the cap table she'd hidden, annotated it, then slid it into my secure drawer next to the cease and desist draft I'd already commissioned. The lawyer I hired specialized in startup fraud and intellectual property disputes. I told him this might get ugly, he said. Good. That's where the trail gets honest. The next morning, she made green juice and kissed my shoulder like always. I asked how the recording session went. She smiled, wide, luminous, and said, "Groundbreaking." I smiled back. I'm sure. It felt surreal. To sit across from someone plotting your deletion. To drink cold-pressed betrayal and nod like everything was normal. She thought she'd outpaced me, outsmarted me, outgrown me. But she was still playing emotional checkers. I'd already built the chessboard, and I knew exactly when to strike. I made the dinner reservation under a different name. Our favorite restaurant, the one with the open kitchen and the view of the harbor. We hadn't been in months. Too busy, too much going unsaid. When I suggested it, she lit up like we were still us. "I love that," she said, brushing a hand down my arm like a truce offering. She wore the emerald dress I'd always liked, the one that made people look twice. When she walked into the restaurant, she owned the space. She always had. She smiled at the host, touched my shoulder lightly as we were led to our table. Her grace was almost convincing, except I'd already seen the blueprint for her exit. We ordered wine. She complimented my haircut, told me I seemed lighter lately. I thanked her, and asked about the new podcast series. Her eyes sparkled, real excitement, not just brand polish. She told me they were on the verge of signing with a major sponsor. "Everything's aligning," she said. I raised my glass. "To alignment." She clinked it softly. "To growth." I waited until the entrees arrived. Then I reached into my bag, pulled out a black folder, and laid it gently between our wine glasses. Her smile faltered just slightly. She looked down, then back up at me. "What's this?" "A timeline," I said. "Of Verge. And how it started. And how it was hijacked." She didn't touch the folder. Just stared at me, eyes narrowing. "I know about the hotel," I said calmly. "And Brian. I know about the rebrand. The new LLC. The attempt to scrub my name from everything we built." She didn't speak, just exhaled, slow through her nose, like a yoga instructor caught mid-lie. "I've seen the NDA drafts, the buy-it clause, the cap table edits." Her mouth opened, then closed. Her posture shifted, shoulders back, chin higher. "This isn't what you think it is." I reached into the folder again and slid out the printed IP filings, official documents showing the tech ownership in my name. "This says otherwise." Her face strained of color. "And this," I said, handing her a sealed envelope, "is a cease and desist for brand infringement. It includes every date-stamped proof of authorship, every wireframe, every original deck. You'll notice your name doesn't appear until page 37. She opened the envelope, skimmed the first page, and then something broke in her face. Not rage, not even shame. Something older, sadder. Like she'd finally reached the part of the story she couldn't rewrite. She looked up at me, eyes wide but not watering. "I thought you'd fight for me." I stared at her. The woman I once built a life with. The woman who could spin self-deception into scripture. "This is me fighting," I said. "For me." Her hand trembled slightly as she folded the letter. Her voice, when it came, was almost inaudible. You were never supposed to see it this way. I nodded. I know. We finished dinner in silence. She didn't touch her food. I boxed mine up. The waiter sensed something and gave us space. When we stood to leave, she reached for my arm. Instinct, not strategy. I stepped back. Outside, the air was cold, clean. She stood beneath the awning, arms crossed like she was shielding herself from a verdict. I didn't offer her a ride. She didn't ask. I watched her walk down the sidewalk until the green dress disappeared around the corner. The next morning, I filed the divorce papers. No warning, no long conversations, just precision. She came home to find the envelope on the counter, sealed beside her green juice. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. By then, the wheels were already turning. I'd frozen the joint accounts the night before, not out of vengeance, but out of necessity. She'd been siphoning funds quietly, small withdrawals to shell accounts marked as wellness expenses. A deeper audit showed consulting invoices from her new LLC, billed against our shared business line. It wasn't just betrayal. It was embezzlement disguised as empowerment. My attorney moved fast. We issued a formal notice to her sponsors, outlining the IP dispute and legal action in progress. Screenshots from her Slack conversations, the rebrand deck metadata trails, all attached. Clean, chronological, undeniable. Sponsors pulled out within 48 hours. Her keynote appearances were cancelled. Her name dropped from 2 upcoming summits. One emailed me personally. Thank you for the clarity. We'll revise our speaker lineup. The cease and desist reached her inbox the following Monday. She posted a cryptic message on social media that afternoon, something about being silenced by larger forces. Her followers rallied briefly. Hearts, affirmations, rallying cries. But silence followed. The kind of silence that doesn't argue. The kind that watches from a safe distance. Because screenshots circulate faster than outrage. The ones I'd compiled showed the brand theft clearly. Her exact phrasing lifted from my outlines. Her exact talking points rephrased in Brian's voice. And then, layered on top, the spreadsheet of financial discrepancies. My name missing. My work credited elsewhere. The image was clear, not of a woman finding her voice, but of someone rehearsing a new persona at someone else's expense. The final nail came from Brian himself. I didn't even have to threaten him. I sent him one file, a screenshot from college, blurry but unmistakable. He was passed out on my dorm bed, beside something that spoke too clearly of the worst decisions we were trying to outrun. I never reported it, never mentioned it, but he knew the implications. He also knew what it would do to his fragile rebrand if it resurfaced during litigation. His resignation from Verge Collective came that same evening. Creative differences, he posted. She didn't comment. By the end of the week, her traffic was down by 60%. 2 sponsorships were formally terminated. The LLC website redirected to a 404. The momentum she'd weaponized had turned on her, not in fury, but in vacancy. Mutual friends stayed quiet. No one took sides, but their silence was telling. Brunch invites stopped. No more birthday texts. Even the therapist she recommended once emailed me, quietly, to offer a referral for someone new. Should you need support? That sentence held more solidarity than any public comment ever could. I moved out 3 weeks later, into a smaller space. Clean lines, no shared memories. I kept only what was indisputably mine, books, records, patents. She stayed in the house, at least for a while. I didn't care. She'd built a stage, not a home. And now the lights were off. I thought it was over. Months passed. My name receded from public posts. Her platform flickered but didn't disappear. She pivoted. More private sessions, less performative. No more co-founders. No more podcasts. Just curated silence, and a few vague updates about focusing inward. Then a colleague forwarded me an email. A publishing contact we'd both worked with back when Verge was just an idea on napkins and not an exhibit in a legal brief. The subject line read, "Seeking endorsement. Upcoming title by A. Carter." The book's title hit harder than the hotel receipt ever had. How I Outgrew Him. A Woman's Guide to Emotional Reinvention. I opened the attached proposal and scanned through it like a man checking a fault line for fresh cracks. There it was, my name, first and last, on page 2. My husband, who encouraged my emotional suppression while applauding my intellect. the rest blurred. But I saw enough. Enough to know she wasn't done writing me out. She was rewriting me as the villain in a redemption arc she could sell. The rage didn't hit me like a wave. It arrived like a spreadsheet, precise, familiar, full of columns that didn't balance. I sent one email. No threats, no dramatics. Just a formal notice from my attorney to her publisher, including cease and desist documentation, the IP disputes, screenshots, the works. It was clinical. Boring, even. The best revenge reads like compliance. They responded within 48 hours. His name will be removed from all future drafts. Legal review ongoing. She never reached out. Instead, I wrote something of my own. Not a memoir. A Medium post. Quiet. Strategic. Titled simply, Emotional Literacy Doesn't Mean Overlooking Betrayal. I didn't name her. I didn't need to. The story was clear. A meditation on how emotional language can be twisted to distort reality. How healing can be used to hide harm, how silence isn't always wisdom. It trended slowly, then steadily, shared by people who recognized their own erasures inside my lines. Thank you for watching. Bye.